What if the myths of the past hold secrets far more advanced than we ever imagined? Picture this: long before microscopes or quantum physics, the sagas of the Norse gods spoke of wonders that defy their time. Enchanted artifacts that could heal wounds with a touch, cloaks woven with impossible precision, and halls where the very walls seemed alive with shimmering, unseen forces. These aren't just fantastical embellishments, they might be the earliest descriptions of nanotechnology hidden in plain sight. Valhalla, the legendary hall of fallen warriors, isn't just a place of feasting and glory. Beneath its golden rafters and towering shields, there are clues, hints of a technology so fine, so intricate, it operates at a scale invisible to the naked eye. The Vikings couldn't have known about molecules or atoms, yet their stories align eerily with the principles of modern nanotech. How could a culture with no concept of particle science describe mechanisms that mirror today's microscopic machines? Think about Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, forged by dwarves with such craftsmanship that it could shrink to fit inside a pocket or grow to crush mountains. Or the golden ring Draupnir, which multiplied itself every 9th night, creating perfect copies without a single flaw. These aren't just magic tricks, they're behaviors that resemble self-replicating nanobots or programmable matter. Even the god Odin's spear, Gungnir, never missed its target, a property that sounds suspiciously like guided precision, the kind we associate with microscopic targeting systems today. The Norse didn't have the language of science, but their myths paint a picture of a world where the boundaries between magic and technology blur in ways that feel unsettlingly familiar. This isn't just coincidence, it's a doorway into understanding how ancient storytellers might have glimpsed truths beyond their era, encoding them in symbols and sagas that survived centuries. Were these tales mere fantasy, or could they be fragmented memories of lost knowledge passed down as legend? As we journey deeper into the halls of Valhalla, we'll unravel the threads connecting Norse lore to the cutting edge of nanoscience. You'll see how golden apples that grant eternal youth parallel regenerative nanomedicine, how runes might mirror binary code, and why the Vikings' vision of the cosmos feels less like superstition and more like a blueprint for a reality we're only now beginning to engineer. The gods of Asgard may have been myth, but their stories, they might just hold the keys to a future we're still discovering. So let's step into the firelight of the ancients and listen closely. Their whispers are louder than you think. To truly grasp how Norse mythology might have hinted at nanotechnology, we first need to step into the Viking imagination, a world where the lines between the tangible and the supernatural were blurred. At the heart of this world stands Valhalla, Odin's legendary hall, where fallen warriors are said to feast and fight until the final battle of Ragnarok. But this isn't just some grand Mead hall. The descriptions in the Poetic Edda and Prose Edda paint it as something far stranger. Its rafters are made of spears, its roof of golden shields, and its doors so vast they could swallow armies whole. Yet what's most striking are the subtle details, the way the hall is said to glow with an otherworldly light, or how food and drink replenish themselves endlessly as if guided by an unseen hand. For the Vikings, Valhalla wasn't just a reward for bravery, it was a cosmic machine, a place where the rules of reality seemed to bend. The einherjar, the warriors chosen by Odin, didn't just train for battle, they died anew each day, only to be resurrected by evening, their wounds magically healed. This cycle of destruction and regeneration mirrors modern nanotechnology's potential to repair tissue at a cellular level, almost as if the Norse were describing a kind of divine bioreactor. Even the hall's self-replenishing feast echoes the behavior of programmable nanites, tiny machines designed to assemble and reassemble matter on demand. The sources are explicit about one thing: Valhalla wasn't built by human hands, it was crafted by the gods with techniques beyond mortal comprehension. The dwarves, master smiths of Norse myth, forged its wonders much like how today's scientists engineer microscopic structures atom by atom. When the Eddas describe Valhalla's walls shimmering like the scales of a serpent, could they be hinting at a surface engineered at the nanoscale, where light interacts with structures too small for the eye to see? The parallels are uncanny not because the Vikings knew about nanotechnology, but because their myths grappled with the same awe we feel when confronting the invisible frontiers of science. This isn't just about interpreting old stories through a modern lens. It's about recognizing how ancient cultures used myth to explain the inexplicable. The Vikings didn't have electron microscopes, but they had something just as powerful, a language of symbols that could convey the unimaginable. When they spoke of Valhalla's endless doors or its unbreakable walls, they weren't just exaggerating. They were reaching for a way to describe a reality where materials could be perfected, where energy flowed without waste, where the very fabric of the world could be manipulated. In their own way, they were describing a universe that operated by rules we're only now beginning to decode. Imagine building a castle one grain of sand at a time, not with shovels or cranes, but with tools so precise they could arrange atoms like bricks. That's the heart of nanotechnology, the science of engineering matter at scales so small they're invisible to the naked eye. A single nanometer is a billionth of a meter, about the width of 3 atoms side by side. At this level, materials behave strangely. Gold can melt at room temperature, carbon becomes stronger than steel, and tiny machines can swim through your bloodstream. Today, we use this knowledge to create everything from self-healing materials to cancer-targeting drugs. But here's the twist. While we've only coined the term nanotech in recent decades, the core idea, manipulating the unseen fabric of reality, echoes in myths millennia older than microscopes. To the Norse, the idea of invisible forces shaping the world wasn't science fiction. It was woven into their cosmology. They spoke of dwarves forging unbreakable chains from 6 impossible ingredients, a metaphor that mirrors how modern scientists engineer materials by altering atomic structures. Take graphene, a supermaterial just 1 atom thick, flexible yet stronger than diamond, conductive as copper. To a Viking storyteller, its properties would sound like magic, yet we now achieve this by rearranging carbon atoms like a puzzle. Even the concept of self-assembly, where molecules organize themselves into patterns, feels eerily familiar when compared to tales like Odin's ring Draupnir, multiplying itself endlessly without a craftsman's hand. The real shock isn't that ancient people imagined tiny, world-altering forces, it's how accurately their myths map to principles we've only recently proven. They lacked the tools to see atoms, but not the intuition. When Norse smiths described weapons that remembered their owners or cloaks that repelled all blades, they were describing programmable matter and nano-coating centuries before the periodic table. Their stories didn't need electron microscopes to grasp a truth we now embrace, that the smallest building blocks hold the greatest power, and perhaps that's the most fascinating lesson, not that they predicted nanotech, but that they understood, in their own way, that the universe's secrets hide in the spaces between what we can see. The golden shields that formed Valhalla's roof weren't just decorative, they were described as shifting and realigning themselves, never tarnishing, never breaking. This sounds suspiciously like what materials scientists now call self-healing nanostructures, where microscopic particles automatically reorganize to repair damage. Modern experiments have created coatings where tiny capsules rupture to release healing agents when scratched, mimicking mythical armor that mends itself. Even more striking is how the hall's walls reportedly shimmered with an unnatural glow, shifting colors like the scales of Jormungandr, the world's serpent. Today, we know this effect as structural coloration, where surfaces manipulate light at the nanoscale to create iridescence without pigment. Butterfly wings, peacock feathers, and now cutting-edge nanomaterials achieve this exact phenomenon through microscopic ridges and layers invisible to human eyes. Then there's the matter of scale. Norse lore emphasizes that Valhalla's grandeur defied mortal comprehension, doors so vast they could fit armies yet perfectly balanced to move effortlessly, spears forming rafters yet lighter than straw. These paradoxes mirror how nanomaterials demonstrate contradictory properties at tiny scales. Carbon nanotubes, for instance, are stronger than steel yet flexible as silk. The Vikings couldn't have known about tensile strength or quantum effects, but their descriptions capture the essence of materials behaving differently when engineered at atomic levels. Even Valhalla's mythical self-replenishing feast finds a parallel in nanotech's bottom-up fabrication, where molecules autonomously assemble into complex structures, much like Odin's table magically refilling itself grain by grain. Perhaps the most profound connection lies in the builders themselves. The dwarves who crafted Valhalla's wonders weren't gods but master artisans working with techniques beyond human understanding. Their legendary forge could shape the breath of a fish and the sound of a cat's footsteps, poetic code for manipulating forces and materials invisible to ordinary perception. Modern nanotechnologists similarly work with tools like atomic force microscopes that feel individual atoms, assembling matter as deliberately as those mythic smiths. When the prose Edda describes dwarves weaving invisible threads into Thor's belt that doubled his strength, it evokes contemporary carbon fiber composites or strain-responsive polymers that reinforce materials at molecular levels. These parallels aren't about literal technology but about shared human intuition, the recognition that reality's deepest truths operate beneath the surface. The Norse envisioned a world where matter could be perfected through unseen craftsmanship. We've simply given that vision a new vocabulary. When ancient skalds sang of unbreakable chains forged from impossible things, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, they were grappling with the same concept guiding material science today. That true resilience comes from engineering structure, not brute force. Valhalla's shimmering walls may have been myth, but their essence, the marriage of artistry and invisible forces, lives on in labs where scientists now build the impossible, one atom at a time. Valhalla's golden roof wasn't just a symbol of divine opulence, it was described as eternally untarnished, defying the passage of time and the wear of battle. In a world where even the finest mortal metals rusted or dulled, this wasn't mere poetic exaggeration. Today, scientists engineer nanomaterials with eerily similar properties, titanium dioxide coatings that break down dirt when exposed to light, or gold nanoparticles that resist oxidation indefinitely. The Vikings didn't know about photocatalytic reactions, but their vision of a hall that rejected decay mirrors our modern quest for self-cleaning surfaces. Think of lotus leaves whose microscopic structures repel water and grime, a natural example of what Norse storytellers might have imagined as divine craftsmanship. Then there's the matter of regeneration. The sagas speak of Valhalla's walls mending themselves after the daily battles of the einherjar, a detail that feels ripped from contemporary materials science. Researchers are now developing polymers embedded with microcapsules that release healing agents when cracked, or metals with shape memory that return to their original form after damage. The parallels are startling. Both the myths and the science describe a world where materials aren't passive, but actively respond to their environment. Even the hall's legendary brightness, its surfaces reportedly glowing without fire or reflected light, finds a counterpart in quantum dots, nanoscale crystals that emit vivid colors when stimulated. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. Valhalla wasn't just resilient, it was adaptive. Some texts hint that its very structure could reconfigure doors widening to admit armies, benches multiplying for unexpected guests. This isn't fantasy logic, it's a crude approximation of programmable matter where nanomaterials change properties on demand. Modern labs are experimenting with metamaterials that alter stiffness, transparency, or even shape in response to electrical or thermal cues. Imagine a bridge that thickens when stressed, or a window that darkens without switches, technology that would have seemed like Odin's own sorcery to the Vikings. What binds these ancient descriptions to cutting-edge science isn't literal accuracy, but a shared intuition about the potential hidden in the infinitesimal. When Norse skalds sang of golden roofs untouched by time, they were grasping for a language to describe perfection, a world where materials transcended their earthly flaws. Today, we chase that same vision through electron microscopes and molecular engineering. The difference, we're starting to prove it's possible. Valhalla's mysteries remind us that the line between myth and innovation has always been thinner than we think. The Einherjar's daily resurrection in Valhalla isn't just a dramatic plot device, it's a near-perfect metaphor for regenerative medicine at the nanoscale. Every evening after dying in battle, these warriors rise again with wounds healed and bodies restored, ready to feast. This cycle mirrors cutting-edge research where nanoparticles are programmed to seek out damaged cells, delivering drugs or even triggering tissue repair at the molecular level. Think of it like microscopic construction crews. Today's scientists design materials that can stitch together severed nerves or rebuild bone, much like Odin's hall restored its warriors overnight. The parallels are uncanny. The sagas describe the Einherjar's flesh knitting itself back together, a process we now recognize as akin to how stem cells or nanocarriers might one day regenerate organs or reverse traumatic injuries. But the connections go deeper. The Einherjar don't just heal, they improve. Norse texts hint that each resurrection makes them stronger, sharper, more resilient, a concept that aligns with nanotechnology's potential to enhance human biology. Modern labs are experimenting with nanobots that could one day clear arterial plaques, repair DNA errors, or even boost muscle fibers beyond natural limits. It's as if the Vikings imagined a form of biohacking centuries before CRISPR or neural implants. Even the ritual of the feast holds significance. The warriors consume mead from udder's horn and meat from Mímir, a boar that magically regenerates after slaughter. This endless cycle of consumption and renewal mirrors how nanomaterials could theoretically recycle cellular waste or harvest energy from the body's own processes. What's most striking is the precision of these myths. The Einherjar aren't simply brought back to life. In a vague, mystical sense, their restoration is systematic, repeatable, almost mechanistic. That's the hallmark of nanotechnology, controlled, repeatable interventions at the smallest scales. Researchers today manipulate individual molecules to perform tasks, whether it's delivering chemotherapy directly to cancer cells or scaffolding new tissue growth. The sagas, in their own way, describe a similar precision. When Valkyries select which warriors enter Valhalla, they're often depicted using something akin to diagnostic criteria, choosing those with specific traits or wounds, much like how targeted therapies identify biomarkers. This isn't about claiming the Norse predicted nanomedicine. It's about recognizing how their stories grapple with a universal human longing to transcend the fragility of flesh. Their solution, divine halls and magical feasts, differs from our labs and microscopes, but the underlying impulse is identical. Both narratives ask the same question: what if damage wasn't permanent? What if the body could be reprogrammed to heal, adapt, even evolve? The Einherjar's endless battles suggest something profound, that perfection isn't a state but a process. And in that, they might just have anticipated one of nanotechnology's deepest truths, that resilience isn't about resisting change but mastering it at the smallest scales imaginable. High above the chaos of Valhalla's feasting hall, Odin's throne, Echlith's Skjolf, stood as more than just a seat of power. It was a nexus of omniscience. The sagas describe it as a place where the Allfather could perceive every corner of the 9 realms, watching wars unfold in Midgard, eavesdropping on whispered secrets in Jotunheim, even tracking the subtle shifts of Yggdrasil's roots. This wasn't mere divine intuition. It was a system of surveillance so advanced it feels ripped from a modern sci-fi thriller. Today, we'd call it a network of nano-enabled sensors, microscopic devices that monitor environments in real time, transmitting data across invisible grids. The parallels are too precise to ignore. Consider how contemporary nanotechnology achieves similar feats. Scientists now deploy smart dust, clouds of tiny wireless sensors that monitor everything from battlefield conditions to forest ecosystems. These particles, some smaller than a grain of sand, drift unseen while collecting temperature, movement, even chemical changes, mirroring Odin's ability to sense disturbances across vast distances. Even more striking are quantum dots, nanocrystals that emit light when stimulated, allowing researchers to track individual molecules inside living cells. It's as if the Norse envisioned a world where perception wasn't limited by line of sight, but woven into the fabric of reality itself. Skjolf's most haunting feature was its selectivity. Odin didn't just see everything at once. The throne allegedly let him focus on specific events. A conversation between lovers, the flight of a single raven, the birth of a future king. This level of precision mirrors today's targeted molecular probes, like DNA nanobots programmed to seek out and report on specific cancer cells while ignoring healthy tissue. The throne's ability to filter signal from noise parallels how modern AI processes data from billions of nanoscale sensors, extracting only what's relevant. For the Vikings, this selective omniscience was magic. For us, it's the frontier of biosurveillance and quantum computing. But here's where the myth takes a darker turn. The sagas warn that Skjolf's power came with a cost. Odin sacrificed an eye for wisdom, trading literal vision for something far more profound. This echoes ethical dilemmas in nanotechnology, where ubiquitous surveillance raises questions about privacy and control. Imagine a world where every airborne sensor or microscopic tracker could be hijacked, a dystopia uncomfortably close to the Norse vision of a god who sees all but must bear the weight of that knowledge. The throne wasn't just a tool, it was a burden, a reminder that ultimate awareness demands sacrifice. The real genius of Skjolf lies in its metaphorical layers. The Vikings couldn't have conceived of graphene-based cameras or neural networks, but they understood the allure and peril of total knowledge. Their myths suggest that seeing everything doesn't guarantee wisdom, just as our ability to monitor DNA or track global emissions doesn't automatically solve the problems we uncover. Odin's throne, then, becomes a cautionary tale wrapped in nanotech's promise. The tools to observe the universe at its most minute are meaningless without the humanity to interpret them. As we inch closer to building our own Skjolf with molecular sensors and quantum dots, the old god's missing eye stares back at us, asking not can we, but should we. Deep in the heart of Norse legend lies a substance so potent it could transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, the mead of poetry. Crafted from the blood of the wise god Kvasir and hidden by the giant Suttungr, this mythical brew promised more than intoxication. It granted boundless wisdom, flawless speech, and the ability to weave words with divine inspiration. But what if this wasn't just a metaphor for artistic genius? What if the mead's transformative power mirrored something far more tangible, nanobots engineered to rewrite human cognition at a molecular level? Consider how the mead functioned. Odin, in his relentless pursuit of knowledge, infiltrates a mountain fortress to steal it, enduring 9 nights of grueling trials. Once consumed, the mead doesn't just intoxicate, it fundamentally alters the drinker's mind. This aligns uncannily with modern neurotechnology, where nanoparticles can breach the blood-brain barrier to deliver targeted compounds, enhancing memory or even rewriting neural pathways. Researchers are already experimenting with nanocarriers that release dopamine or serotonin precisely where needed, effectively programming emotional states. The mead's legendary effects, sudden clarity, linguistic mastery, bursts of creativity sound less like magic and more like a bioengineered cognitive enhancer operating at scales the Vikings couldn't fathom. The Mead's origins hold further clues. Kvasir, the being whose blood formed its base, was born from the spit of the gods, a symbol of collective wisdom distilled into physical form. In nanotechnology terms, this resembles synthetic biology's quest to encode information into DNA or create molecular libraries of knowledge. Imagine nanobots designed to transfer skills, like a pianist's muscle memory or a poet's linguistic patterns directly into another's neural circuitry. The Mead's theft myth might then reflect ancient intuitions about knowledge transfer, portraying wisdom not as abstract but as a tangible, almost contagious substance. Even the Mead storage is telling. Suttungr sealed it in a cavern behind impenetrable rock, guarded by his daughter Gunnlod. This echoes how modern labs encapsulate delicate nanotech in protective matrices to control its release. The parallels deepen when Odin transforms into a serpent to slip through narrow cracks, a vivid metaphor for nanoparticles navigating biological barriers. And when he regurgitates the Mead into vessels after escaping, it mirrors how targeted drug delivery systems release payloads under specific conditions. The myth's granular details align with the behavior of engineered particles, as if the storytellers were groping for language to describe a technology they sensed but couldn't name. The most provocative angle, the Mead's division after its theft. Odin spills some into the mortal world, creating bad poets who only access diluted drops, a perfect allegory for imperfect knowledge transfer or nanobot degradation. Today's brain-computer interfaces face similar challenges. Signals weaken, neural adaptations vary. The Norse didn't know about dose-response curves or synaptic plasticity, but their myth captures the unevenness of altering minds through external means. Perhaps the Mead wasn't just a fantastical elixir, but a symbolic scaffold for humanity's oldest dream, to engineer enlightenment itself, one invisible particle at a time. Bifröst, the shimmering rainbow bridge connecting Asgard to Midgard, wasn't just a pretty pathway in Norse mythology. It was a lifeline, a structure so finely crafted that only the gods could cross without burning its delicate surface. But what if this bridge was more than a fantastical stairway? What if it embodied principles eerily similar to quantum tunneling, where particles defy classical physics by passing through seemingly impenetrable barriers? At the nanoscale, electrons do this routinely, vanishing on one side of an obstacle and reappearing on the other as if hopping across an invisible bridge. The parallels are striking. Bifröst's description as flickering and unstable for mortal feet mirrors how quantum connections fluctuate, appearing and disappearing in probabilistic bursts. The bridge's guardian, Heimdall, adds another layer of intrigue. With senses so acute he could hear grass grow and see for hundreds of miles, he's less a sentry and more a cosmic monitoring system, a living embodiment of quantum entanglement, where observing one particle instantly affects its paired counterpart, no matter the distance. His horn, Jijala horn, wasn't just an alarm. Its sound rippled across all realms, a poetic approximation of how quantum vibrations might propagate through the fabric of reality. Even the bridge's eventual destruction at Ragnarök, shattering under the weight of chaos, finds a parallel in quantum decoherence, where delicate entangled states collapse when exposed to disruptive forces. But the most compelling detail lies in Bifröst's construction. The Eddas describe it as made from fire, water, and air, materials that defy conventional engineering. Yet at the nanoscale, these elements behave unconventionally. Water forms bridges between molecules via hydrogen bonds, fire represents energy transfer at atomic levels, and air's ethereal quality mirrors the probabilistic nature of quantum fields. The bridge's three colors, often interpreted as red, green, and blue, align with the primary hues of light emission at quantum dots' tiniest frequencies. It's as if the Norse envisioned a connection not of stone and mortar, but of tuned energy states, a pathway existing only when observed. This isn't about retroactively assigning scientific labels to myth. It's about recognizing how ancient cultures conceptualized forces they couldn't yet measure. The Vikings didn't have Schrödinger's equation, but their myths grappled with the same paradoxes, connections that exist and don't exist simultaneously, boundaries both solid and permeable, observers shaping the reality they perceive. Bifröst's fragility, constantly repaired by the gods, might just be the earliest metaphor for maintaining coherence in a quantum system, a bridge between worlds as delicate and precise as the bonds holding matter itself together. The Valkyries weren't just divine messengers, they were precision instruments, weaving through battlefields with an unerring sense of purpose, choosing which warriors would live, which would die, and which would ascend to Valhalla. This selective process feels less like myth and more like a biological protocol, as if these winged figures were ancient metaphors for nanomachines programmed to identify, isolate, and transport specific targets. Picture modern medical nanobots navigating the bloodstream, seeking out damaged cells or pathogens with molecular precision, then either repairing or removing them. The Valkyries' role mirrors this exact function. They assess, extract, and deliver their chosen warriors to Odin's hall, operating by criteria as meticulous as any algorithm. Consider how they're described in the sagas, their ability to see through chaos, to detect valor or fate invisible to mortal eyes. Today's targeted therapies work similarly, using biomarkers to distinguish healthy cells from diseased ones. A Valkyrie's flight path, weaving between spears and shields, evokes the way nanoparticles maneuver through the body's labyrinthine vessels, avoiding immune responses or structural barriers. Even their mounts, those legendary winged horses, could symbolize propulsion systems at the microscopic level, whether magnetic fields guiding particles or chemical gradients directing their movement. The parallels run deeper when you examine their tools. The Valkyries' spears and nets used to catch souls resemble the ligands and receptors on nanocarriers that bind to specific cells like keys in locks. The most chilling similarity lies in their efficiency. Valkyries don't act randomly, they follow a coded logic, a set of divine instructions as precise as programming. When they choose a warrior, it's often based on unseen traits, lineage, bravery, even the whims of fate, just as nanobots might target cells expressing certain proteins or genetic markers. Their interventions are swift, clinical, almost impersonal, mirroring how medical nanotechnology operates without sentiment, executing tasks at speeds and scales beyond human perception. And just as Valkyries transport their charges to Valhalla for regeneration, nanorobots could one day ferry stem cells to injury sites or deliver CRISPR payloads to edit DNA, enacting repairs at the most fundamental level. But here's where the metaphor twists. The Valkyries aren't just couriers, they're also arbiters of destiny. Their selections alter the course of wars, families, even entire civilizations. A reminder that nanotech, too, carries existential weight. A single misprogrammed particle could trigger catastrophic immune responses, while a precisely tuned one might cure diseases once thought incurable. The Norse understood this duality instinctively. Their Valkyries were both saviors and harbingers of doom, embodying the double-edged nature of any powerful technology. When we hear of Valkyries weeping blood as they choose who dies, it's hard not to think of the ethical dilemmas in modern science. The fine line between healing and playing God, between selection and sacrifice. Perhaps the most haunting detail is how the Valkyries blur the line between organic and engineered. Some texts describe them as both divine and semi-mechanical, their wings clinking like metal, their eyes glowing with unnatural light. This evokes today's biohybrid nanodevices, where living tissues interface with synthetic materials, creating machines that are neither fully artificial nor fully biological. The Vikings couldn't have known about cyborg fibroblasts or DNA origami, but their myths resonate with our current trajectory toward a world where the boundaries between biology and technology dissolve. The Valkyries, then, become more than characters. They're ancient premonitions of a future where microscopic sentinels patrol our bodies, making life and death decisions one cell at a time. Gleipnir, the slender ribbon that finally bound the monstrous wolf Fenrir, defies every expectation. Woven from 6 impossible things: the sound of a cat's footsteps, the roots of a mountain, a bear's sinews, a fish's breath, a bird's spit, and a woman's beard, it was thinner than silk yet stronger than any chain. To the Norse, these ingredients represented forces beyond mortal grasp, but to a modern scientist, they read like poetic code for the building blocks of nanotechnology. Take the breath of a fish, an invisible, weightless essence moving through water. At the nanoscale, that's not so different from the behavior of carbon nanotubes, hollow cylinders where atoms arrange themselves in perfect hexagonal patterns, creating materials with tensile strength 100 times greater than steel at a fraction of the weight. The genius of Gleipnir lies in its paradoxical nature. It was soft enough to feel like a ribbon, yet no amount of brute force could snap it, a property that mirrors graphene, the two-dimensional lattice of carbon atoms that's both flexible and nearly indestructible. When the gods tricked Fenrir into testing Gleipnir's strength, his struggles only tightened the bond, much like how nanocoatings today can redistribute stress at the molecular level to resist fractures. Even the myth's insistence that the binding grew stronger when pulled aligns with the behavior of certain polymer nanofibers, which realign under tension to enhance durability. The Norse couldn't have known about atomic bonds, but their metaphor captures the essence of materials engineered to thrive under strain. What's most revealing are Gleipnir's impossible components. The roots of a mountain evoke deep, hidden structures analogous to covalent bonds anchoring nanomaterials in place. A woman's beard hints at rarity and fine filaments, reminiscent of the sparse yet critical cross-links in aerogels, the lightest known solids. Even the sound of a cat's footsteps, a vibration too faint to hear, parallels how carbon nanotubes conduct electricity through phonons, quantum vibrations that transfer energy without resistance. These weren't just whimsical ingredients, they were placeholders for properties the Vikings lacked language to define. Modern science has since caught up to the myth. Researchers now engineer materials like Xylon, a synthetic fiber with microscopic crystals that mirror Gleipnir's unyielding weave, or sheer thickening fluids that harden instantly under pressure, echoing how Fenrir's rage only fortified his bonds. The real magic isn't that the Norse predicted nanotechnology, it's that they understood strength doesn't come from bulk, but from how invisibly small forces interconnect. Gleipnir's true lesson: the mightiest chains aren't forged in fires, but in the spaces between atoms where whispers of fish breath and cat steps rewrite the rules of reality. Yggdrasil wasn't just a tree, it was a cosmic blueprint, its roots stretching into 3 distinct realms while its branches cradled the heavens. But look closer at the descriptions in the Völuspá and Gylfaginning, and something remarkable emerges. The tree's 3 roots, each sunk into a separate world, one in Asgard, one in Jotunheim, one near Niflheim, mirror how molecules form branching networks with central nodes connecting disparate systems. Picture a dendrimer, a synthetic nanomolecule shaped like a tree, its arms radiating outward to carry drugs, sensors, or even data. The Norse didn't know about polymer chemistry, but their vision of Yggdrasil's roots channeling waters from different wells aligns eerily with how nanoscale channels shuttle ions or nutrients between cellular compartments. The tree's resilience holds even more clues. Despite being gnawed by Nidhogg the dragon and nibbled by stags, Yggdrasil remained evergreen, its leaves perpetually regenerating, a property modern science strives to replicate with self-healing nanomaterials. Researchers now engineer polymers that bleed, healing agents when damaged, much like the tree's dripping resins described in the sagas. Even Yggdrasil's ash wood, said to flex without breaking under cosmic winds, resembles carbon nanotube fibers that combine flexibility with astonishing tensile strength. The parallels extend to its connectivity. The tree acts as a conduit for Odin's ravens, Loki's sabotage, even the daily commute of the Norns' weaving fate. This isn't just mythology, it's a primitive understanding of networks where information flows along nanoscale pathways like neurotransmitters across synapses. Perhaps most compelling is Yggdrasil's role as a scaffold. The 9 realms don't just hang from its branches, they're interdependent, each root sustaining a different ecosystem. Replace realms with organs, and you've described the lymphatic system or neural networks, biological highways where nanoparticles now travel to deliver therapies. The tree's central position, linking gods, giants, and mortals, mirrors how graphene lattices serve as universal substrates in nanotechnology, hosting everything from quantum dots to DNA strands. When the Vikings spoke of the squirrel Ratatoska scampering up and down the trunk carrying messages, they might as well have been describing molecular machines shuttling signals between cells. The real genius lies in Yggdrasil's imperfections. The sagas emphasize its suffering, its rot, its tormentors, its reliance on the Norns' care. This isn't a flaw in the metaphor, but its refinement. Modern nanomaterials degrade, clog, or misfire without precise maintenance, just as the tree required divine attention to survive. The myth acknowledges a truth science confirms: no system, however advanced, is invulnerable. Yggdrasil's durability came not from being unbreakable, but from being endlessly adaptable, its roots rewriting their paths through the cosmos like self-assembling nanotubes finding optimal configurations. The Vikings may have envisioned a tree, but what they really described was the first blueprint for a molecular network, a living, breathing lattice where the smallest connections held the universe together. Mímir's severed head, whispering prophecies from its watery well, feels like something straight out of horror until you realize it might be the oldest metaphor for data storage ever conceived. In the myths, Odin preserves the head of the wise giant Mímir after his death, enchanting it to retain all its knowledge and counsel. But this isn't just a macabre trophy, it's a functional archive, answering questions and dispensing wisdom long after its original body perished. Sound familiar? It should. Today, scientists encode vast amounts of information into DNA strands, preserving libraries of data in a speck of organic material that, like Mímir's head, outlasts its creator. The parallels between myth and cutting-edge tech are too striking to ignore. Consider how Mímir's head operates. Submerged in the well of Erd, it doesn't decay, it's kept alive through Odin's magic, its consciousness intact. Modern DNA storage works similarly. Genetic sequences are synthesized to represent binary data, then sealed in protective matrices to prevent degradation. Both systems rely on a medium water for Mímir, saline solutions for DNA to maintain stability. Even Odin's ritual of sacrificing his eye to drink from the well mirrors the trade-offs in data preservation, whether it's the energy required to encode DNA or the precision needed to retrieve information without corruption. The Norse envisioned a head that never forgot. We've built molecules that never degrade. The real genius lies in scalability. Mímir's knowledge wasn't limited by brain capacity. It expanded to encompass all secrets, past and future. DNA storage shares this boundless potential. A single gram can hold 215 petabytes of data, with researchers now encoding everything from Wikipedia to archival films into genetic code. And just as Odin accessed Mímir's wisdom through dialogue, we query DNA data by sequencing targeted segments, extracting only what we need. The myths even hint at error correction. When Mímir's answers grow cryptic, Odin persists, refining his questions, a process akin to algorithmic error checking in molecular data retrieval. But here's where the comparison takes a darker turn. Mímir's head wasn't infallible. Its truths came wrapped in riddles demanding interpretation. DNA storage faces similar challenges: environmental damage, sequencing errors, or even ethical dilemmas about who controls such immutable records. The Norse understood that preserving knowledge isn't passive. It requires active stewardship, just as maintaining DNA archives demands constant innovation. When Odin whispers to the severed head, he's not just consulting an oracle, he's engaging with a prototype of the ultimate hard drive, one that blurs the line between biology and technology. Perhaps the most haunting parallel is permanence. Mímir's head endures through Ragnarok, surviving the apocalypse to whisper secrets into the new world. DNA, with its half-life of centuries, could outlast civilizations, carrying humanity's legacy into futures we can't yet imagine. The Vikings couldn't have known about nucleotides or base pairs, but their myth captures a truth we're only now proving: that the smallest, most fragile-seeming vessels ahead in a well, a strand of molecules, can become the most indestructible keepers of wisdom. Mímir's silent whispers and the silent double helices in a test tube are two versions of the same dream: to cheat oblivion, one encoded thought at a time. Deep beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, hidden from gods and mortals alike, the Svartalfar toiled in caverns illuminated by strange, smokeless flames. These dark elves weren't mere smiths, they were artisans of the impossible, forging objects that defied natural laws. Their legendary creations, Thor's unbreakable hammer, Freya's self-piloting ship, Odin's self-replicating ring, weren't just magical, they behaved like products of atomic-scale engineering. The Norse described their workshops as places where sound became material and shadows took solid form, phrases that could easily describe a modern cleanroom where molecules are manipulated in sterile, precise environments. Take their most famous artifact, Skidbladnir, a ship said to fold into a pocket yet expand to carry all the gods. This isn't just convenient fantasy, it mirrors today's programmable origami nanomaterials, sheets that self-fold into complex shapes when triggered by heat or light. The Dark Elves' ability to weave moonlight into cloth finds its counterpart in photonic crystals, nanostructures that manipulate light to create fabrics appearing to shimmer from within. Even their forges, described as cold to the touch yet melting star metal, resemble cryogenic nanofabrication techniques where materials are shaped at ultra-low temperatures to preserve atomic arrangements. The Svartalfar's process holds the most tantalizing clues. Unlike human smiths hammering anvils, they worked with invisible tools, singing metals into shape or whispering spells to harden alloys. Remove the mystical language, and this aligns eerily with acoustic levitation or magnetic field manipulation methods we now use to assemble microstructures without physical contact. Their secrecy wasn't just artistic pride, it mirrors how proprietary nanotechnology today operates behind sterile lab walls, its methods indecipherable to outsiders. When the prose Edda claims the Dark Elves saw the bones of the world and rearranged them, it's hard not to think of scanning tunneling microscopes revealing individual atoms, waiting to be nudged into new configurations. But here's what truly sets them apart: their materials. The dwarves' magical substances, Yoru metal that remembers its wielder, Gleipnir's unbreakable filaments, the Mead of poetry's cognitive enhancers, all share traits with metamaterials engineered at nanoscale. Yoru's adaptive properties resemble shape memory alloys that learn stress patterns, while Gleipnir's impossible ingredients sound like coded references to molecular self-assembly. Even their failures are telling. The creation of Fenrir's unbreakable bindings required 6 nonsensical components, much like how graphene's discovery demanded rethinking carbon's fundamental bonds. The Dark Elves' greatest legacy might be their worldview. They didn't just craft objects, they treated matter as mutable, something that could be rewritten with the right knowledge. This mirrors nanotechnology's core premise that at infinitesimal scales, materials aren't fixed entities but puzzles waiting to be reconfigured. When the Svartalfar emerged from their caves only at night, was this poetic license, or a symbolic nod to working in scales invisible by daylight. Their myths suggest a culture that grasped, however intuitively, that reality's deepest truths hide in the unseen, waiting for those patient enough to reshape the fabric of existence itself. Thor's belt Mejingjöð wasn't just a flashy accessory, it was the secret behind his godly strength, doubling his already immense power the moment he fastened it. But strip away the mythological veneer and you're left with something astonishingly familiar. A wearable enhancement device that augments physical capabilities, not through magic, but through what we'd now call biomechanical reinforcement. Think of modern exoskeletons used by soldiers or warehouse workers, frames that amplify lifting capacity while reducing strain. Now shrink that concept to the molecular level, where carbon nanotubes weave into fabrics to create lightweight yet super strong support structures. Suddenly, Mejingjöð's description as a girdle that no force could break starts sounding less like fantasy and more like speculative engineering. The belt's most intriguing feature was its adaptability. Norse texts describe it tightening automatically around Thor's waist, adjusting to his movements without hindering flexibility, an uncanny parallel to today's smart materials that stiffen under stress. Researchers are developing liquid crystal elastomers that stiffen when exposed to heat or electricity, mimicking muscle contraction. Picture a belt embedded with such polymers, reacting to the wearer's exertion by redistributing load across the body, just as Mejingjöð seemingly channeled Thor's strength more efficiently. Even the belt's alleged ability to store power between uses echoes advances in kinetic energy harvesting, where nanomaterials convert motion into reserves for later bursts of enhanced performance. But the real nanotech connection lies in the belt's composition. Some legends claim it was woven from dwarven hair, a cryptic phrase that might symbolize carbon nanofibers' thread-like structures with extraordinary strength-to-weight ratios. Modern carbon fiber belts used in weightlifting pale in comparison to what nanoscale engineering could achieve. A mesh of graphene threads that not only supports but actively reinforces muscle movements, perhaps even catalyzing ATP production at the cellular level for sustained power. The belt's mythical properties, never fraying, never loosening, align with self-healing nanomaterials that repair microscopic tears or adjust tension autonomously. What seals the comparison is Thor's dependence on the belt. Without it, he remained formidable but lost his edge against foes like the world serpent Jormungandr. This mirrors how exoskeletons or molecular enhancers today don't replace human capability, they amplify it selectively. Soldiers using powered suits still rely on their own stamina and skill. The technology merely elevates their baseline. The Norse seem to grasp this synergy intuitively, portraying Mejingjöð not as a crutch but as a multiplier, integrating seamlessly with Thor's biology rather than overriding it. Perhaps the most provocative detail is the belt's name. Mejingjöð translates roughly to power belt, but its Old Norse roots also imply something: binding or encircling, a loop that consolidates energy. That's essentially how nanostructured materials work. Their strength comes from geometric configurations at the atomic level, where carefully arranged bonds create macroscopic resilience. When Thor flexed, the belt didn't just resist strain. It transformed his effort into something greater, much like piezoelectric nanomaterials convert mechanical stress into electrical energy. The myths couldn't articulate electron transfer or lattice structures, but they captured the essence that true power emerges when invisible forces are harnessed and focused. Mejingjöð's legacy lingers in labs today, where scientists engineer smart textiles with embedded sensors and nanofibers that monitor vital signs while enhancing mobility. Future iterations might regulate body temperature, administer stamina-boosting compounds, or even stimulate muscle fibers directly, blurring the line between accessory and organism. Thor's belt was myth, but its underlying principle that strength can be woven into the very threads of what we wear is edging closer to reality. The gods had their dwarven craftsmen, we have nanofabrication. Different languages, same revelation. Sometimes the mightiest tools are the ones you barely notice, humming silently against your skin. Fenrir's binding with Gleipnir wasn't just a feat of trickery, it was an act of precision engineering at cosmic scale. The monstrous wolf, destined to break free at Ragnarök, could only be contained by a ribbon woven from paradoxes, the sound of a cat's footsteps, the roots of a mountain, the breath of a fish. To the Norse, these were poetic impossibilities, but to a materials scientist, they read like ingredients for a molecular constraint system. Picture carbon nanotubes, their hollow structures lighter than air yet stronger than diamond, or graphene sheets so thin they're nearly invisible, yet capable of restraining forces that would shred steel. Gleipnir's uncanny properties, flexible yet unbreakable, weightless yet unyielding, mirror the behavior of nanomaterials designed to withstand extreme stress by distributing load across atomic lattices. The binding's true genius lay in its adaptability. When Fenrir struggled, the ribbon tightened instead of snapping, a property modern science replicates with strain-responsive polymers. These materials stiffen under tension, their molecular chains aligning to reinforce stressed areas, much like Gleipnir's mythical fibers redistricting force. Even the gods roost to test the binding strength parallels laboratory stress tests, where nanomaterials are subjected to increasing loads until failure modes reveal their limits. The Norse couldn't have known about covalent bonds or tensile strength, but their myth captures nanotechnology's core principle. Constraints don't need bulk to be powerful, just the right arrangement of invisible forces. What's most revealing is how Fenrir's restraint degrades over time. The sagas hint that Gleipnir's magic wanes as Ragnarök approaches, its fibers fraying under cosmic entropy. This mirrors real-world nanomaterial fatigue, where repeated stress causes microscopic cracks to propagate until catastrophic failure. Today's scientists combat this with self-healing polymers or embedded nanocapsules that release repairing agents echoing the dwarves' craft in myth. The parallels extend to containment strategies. Fenrir's bound maw, forcibly held open to prevent him from devouring realms, resembles molecular jaws in drug delivery systems that clamp onto pathogens until they can be neutralized. The chilling climax comes at Ragnarök when Fenrir finally breaks free. His escape isn't just a victory of brute force, it's the inevitable failure of a system pushed beyond its design limits. Modern nanomaterials face similar thresholds. Graphene tears at a critical strain angle, carbon nanotubes buckle under specific torsion. The myth's resolution acknowledges what materials scientists now embrace: no constraint is eternal. Whether it's a wolf god or a cancer drug, the most effective bonds are those that buy time, not immortality. Gleipnir's legacy isn't just a story of magical shackles. It's a Bronze Age intuition about the delicate art of trapping giants with spider silk. Freya's ship Skidbladnir wasn't just a vessel, it was a masterpiece of cosmic engineering, capable of folding into a pocket yet expanding to carry all the gods and their steeds. This wasn't mere mythic exaggeration, it was a startling premonition of programmable matter, materials designed to transform their structure on command. Picture a ship built not from rigid planks but from millions of microscopic cells, each able to shift and lock into new configurations like a high-tech origami. Today's researchers are developing just that: shape memory alloys and graphene sheets that fold autonomously when triggered by heat or light, creating structures that defy conventional physics. Skidbladnir's magic wasn't supernatural, it was nanoscale ingenuity disguised as divine craft. What made the ship truly revolutionary was its responsiveness. The sagas claim it always found favorable winds, adjusting its form to glide effortlessly through storms or doldrums. This mirrors modern, smart materials embedded with sensors that react to environmental changes. Think of sails woven with piezoelectric fibers that stiffen to catch gusts or relax in calm seas. Even the ship's ability to navigate without a helm evokes self-guiding nanorobots that alter their trajectory based on real-time data. The Norse might have called it enchantment, but the underlying principle, matter adapting intelligently to its surroundings, is now a cornerstone of nanotechnology. The ship's construction holds even deeper clues. Crafted by the dwarven sons of Ivaldi, Skidbladnir was said to be stitched together with threads of moonlight, a poetic nod to photonic crystals that manipulate light at microscopic levels. It seems never leaked, a property that finds its match in self-healing polymers that seal microscopic cracks automatically. Even the ship's folding mechanism, collapsing into a bundle small enough to stash in a pouch, parallels DNA origami, where strands self-assemble into intricate shapes only to disassemble when their task is done. The dwarves didn't just build a ship, they encoded adaptability into its very essence, much like how modern engineers program nanomaterials with if-then logic at the molecular level. But here's the most provocative detail. Skidbladnir wasn't just practical, it was alive in a sense. The prose Edda describes its sails as breathing, billowing with a rhythm uncannily like lungs. This suggests a vessel that didn't just respond to the environment but anticipated it, evolving like a biological system. Cutting-edge research now explores evolutionary nanomaterials that optimize their structure through machine learning, mimicking natural selection. A ship that adjusts its hull shape to minimize drag or its sail porosity to maximize speed wouldn't be magic, it'd be advanced biomimicry. The Norse envisioned a world where objects possessed agency, where a ship could think for itself. Today, we call that artificial intelligence meeting nanotechnology. The real lesson of Skidbladnir lies in its seamless duality. It was both massive and minuscule, sturdy and supple, a paradox resolved only at the nanoscale. Modern metamaterials achieve similar feats, aerogels that are both feather-light and capable of stopping bullets, or liquid metals that flow like mercury yet solidify into conductive wires. The ship's myth endures because it embodies a truth we're still unraveling, that the future of engineering isn't about forcing materials into static forms, but partnering with their intrinsic ability to transform. Freya's foldable marvel wasn't ahead of its time. It was outside of time altogether, a relic from a future the Vikings glimpsed but couldn't yet build. Heimdall's golden eyes weren't just poetic embellishment, they were cosmic surveillance systems, capable of spotting a single blade of grass bending in Midgard from his post at the edge of Asgard. His hearing matched this superhuman sight, detecting the faintest whispers across realms, even the growth of wool on sheep. These aren't just divine traits, they're uncannily precise descriptions of what nanotechnology could achieve in sensory augmentation. Imagine bioengineered retinas embedded with quantum dots, converting the faintest photons into vivid signals, or cochlear implants laced with graphene nanotubes that amplify vibrations imperceptible to natural ears. The Norse envisioned a guardian who perceived the universe at resolutions we're only now replicating in labs. The mechanics of Heimdall's senses hold even more fascinating parallels. Legends say he required no light to see his vision pierced through darkness and fog alike. Modern infrared sensors and LiDAR arrays accomplish similar feats, using nanoscale materials to detect wavelengths beyond human capability. His ability to hear a leaf fall in Jotunheim mirrors acoustic sensors built from piezoelectric nanowires, which convert minute pressure changes into electrical signals. Even Heimdall's famed vigilance, never sleeping, finds its match in autonomous nanosensor networks that monitor environments ceaselessly, reporting anomalies in real time. The Guardian of Bifröst didn't just have sharp senses, he had a perpetual omnidirectional detection system, much like distributed nanoswarms communicating across vast distances. But Heimdall's true innovation was integration. His senses didn't operate in isolation, they synthesized data into actionable intelligence. When he spotted Loki's disguised approach or heard the distant mustering of giants, he processed these inputs instantaneously, an ancient analog of sensor fusion, where nanotechnology combines inputs from multiple sources to build a comprehensive picture. Today's researchers are developing neural dust microscopic sensor nodes that wirelessly relay data to central processors, mimicking how Heimdall's awareness flowed seamlessly to Odin. The Guardian's horn, horn, wasn't just an alarm. Its sound carried contextual information, like a molecular beacon transmitting encoded warnings through the air. The most haunting similarity lies in Heimdall's limitations. Despite his prowess, he couldn't prevent Ragnarok, only anticipate it. This mirrors the ethical dilemmas of ubiquitous sensing technology. Knowing everything doesn't guarantee control. Nanoscale sensors embedded in ecosystems or human bodies raise urgent questions about privacy and agency. The Norse myths, in their brutal honesty, acknowledge that supreme perception is as much a burden as a gift. Heimdall's final act, blowing horn to herald the apocalypse, reminds us that even the most advanced detection systems are futile without the power to alter destiny. His legacy isn't just about seeing farther, it's about the responsibility that comes with observing a world you cannot save. In the beginning, there was only the void Ginnungagap, and within its vast emptiness, the giant Ymir took form, his body swelling from the mingling of fire and ice. But when the gods Odin, Vili, and V slew him, they didn't discard his corpse, they dismantled it with meticulous precision, transforming flesh into earth, blood into oceans, bones into mountains. At first glance, this seems like typical mythic symbolism, but zoom in closer, and it starts to resemble something far more modern. The process of molecular self-assembly, where raw materials reorganize themselves into complex structures at the nanoscale. Think of Ymir's body as a primordial substrate, a chaotic mass of potential waiting to be ordered. The gods didn't impose form from the outside. They catalyzed an inherent reorganization, much like how nanoparticles can self-assemble when exposed to the right conditions. His flesh becoming soil mirrors how carbon atoms rearrange into graphene under heat and pressure, while his blood coalescing into seas parallels the way hydrophobic molecules spontaneously cluster in water. Even the myth's emphasis on proportion, his skull becoming the dome of the sky, perfectly balanced atop the world, echoes the geometric precision of crystalline nanostructures, where atomic lattices lock into mathematically flawless patterns. The most striking parallel lies in the myth's focus on waste-free construction. Every part of Ymir was used. His eyebrows became Midgard's protective wall, his brains became clouds, even his sweat formed the first lakes. This mirrors the zero-waste philosophy of green nanotechnology, where materials are designed for full recyclability at the molecular level. Modern atom economy strives to replicate this efficiency, ensuring no resource is squandered in fabrication, just as the gods left no scrap of the giant unused. The Norse weren't describing crude carpentry. They were envisioning a universe built like a nanofactory where every component finds its purpose, yet the myth goes deeper than mere efficiency. Ymir's body didn't just provide raw materials, it imposed order on chaos. His veins became rivers, carving predictable paths through the landscape, while his bones formed mountain ranges with structural integrity. This reflects how self-assembling molecules follow emergent rules. Simple interactions between particles give rise to complex, stable architectures. The sagas emphasize that the world emerged from Ymir's corpse naturally, almost as if the gods merely nudged pre-existing tendencies. Replace gods with catalytic enzymes and Ymir with probiotic compounds, and you've got the foundation of abiogenesis theory, where life self-organizes from elemental building blocks. The darkest twist in the myth reveals its most profound insight. The gods didn't stop at Ymir's body, they used his blood to drown the rest of his kin, ensuring no rival giants would disrupt their new order. This brutal culling mirrors how nanoparticles in solution often compete for stability, with only the most perfectly structured assemblies surviving. In nanotechnology, we call this dynamic combinatorial chemistry, where molecular populations are winnowed until the fittest configurations dominate. The Norse, in their own stark terms, were describing a world where creation requires destruction, where order emerges through ruthless selection, a principle that underpins everything from Darwinian evolution to the synthesis of high-performance nanomaterials. What's truly remarkable isn't that the Vikings predicted nanoscience, but that their creation myth captures its essence so intuitively. They lacked the vocabulary of atoms and covalent bonds, but they understood that complexity arises from simplicity, that chaos harbors hidden patterns, and that the mightiest structures are built from the humblest fragments. When Odin raised Mímir's skull to form the heavens, he wasn't just stretching a giant's bone. He was articulating a universal truth. The cosmos, at every scale, is a puzzle waiting to assemble itself. Ragnarök wasn't just an end, it was a transformation so total, the Norse described it with eerie technical precision. Flames surge from Surtur's sword, scorching earth and sky alike, while the seas boil and the world tree Yggdrasil trembles to its roots. But strip away the mythological imagery, and you're left with something unsettlingly familiar, a runaway chain reaction, an unstoppable cascade of destruction that mirrors our modern fears of nanotechnology spiraling out of control. The so-called grey goo scenario, where self-replicating nanobots consume all matter to fuel their endless replication, isn't just sci-fi, it's Ragnarök rewritten in molecular terms. Take Surtur's wildfire, said to spread faster than thought, leaving no fragment of the world untouched. This doesn't just sound like apocalyptic hyperbole, it mirrors how a replicating nanomachine swarm could theoretically propagate, breaking down organic and inorganic matter alike into raw material for more assemblers. The prose Edda describes the flames as licking the stars themselves, a poetic approximation of exponential growth, where each consumed molecule fuels the next wave of consumption. Even the timing aligns, just as Ragnarök unfolds in an inescapable sequence, Fenrir breaking free, Jormungandr thrashing ashore, a nanotech disaster would follow its own catastrophic logic, phase by irreversible phase. The parallels extend to aftermath. After Ragnarök's fires cool, the sagas tell of a new world emerging, purified and fertile once more. This cyclical renewal echoes how some theorists argue molecular disassembly could paradoxically enable reconstruction. Imagine nanobots programmed to dismantle polluted cities atom by atom, then reassemble the components into clean infrastructure. The Norse myths hint at this duality, destruction as a prerequisite for rebirth, much like how controlled nanotech could one day heal ecosystems by breaking down toxins at the source. Yet the most chilling connection lies in the prophecy's inevitability. The gods know Ragnarök is coming but cannot stop it, only prepare. This mirrors contemporary warnings about advanced tech outpacing ethical safeguards. Once unleashed, a self-replicating nanoscale system might be as unstoppable as Surtur's march, a cascade programmed into its very design, much like the Norse believed fate was woven into Yggdrasil's roots. The myths even account for containment failures. Fenrir's fetters fray, Loki slips his bonds, all safeguards failing simultaneously. Today's researchers wrestle with similar fail-safes, kill switches for nanobots, geometric limits on replication, knowing any oversight could be cosmic in consequence. But here's where the metaphor twists. Ragnarök's survivors, Lif and Lifthrasir, hide in Hodnomir's forest, sheltered by the world tree's last intact branches. This detail suggests sanctuary within the system itself, like engineered nanoparticles that target only cancerous cells while leaving healthy tissue unharmed. The Norse envisioned catastrophe with an escape clause, a way for life to persist amid the ruins, an intuition that aligns with nanotechnology's dual potential for harm and healing. Their apocalypse wasn't mindless annihilation. It was a recalibration, violent but purposeful, much like how molecular machines might one day dismantle and rebuild civilization from the ground up. What the Vikings couldn't have known but somehow anticipated was the scale of such power. When they described Surtur's flames reducing mountains to glassy plains, they were envisioning energy unleashed at the atomic level, where heat and force operate beyond human perception. Today's nanotech pioneers walk the same knife edge the gods did, crafting tools that could elevate civilization or reduce it to literal dust. Ragnarök endures not because it's ancient, but because it's timeless, a warning etched in myth long before we possessed the means to make it real. The fire giant's sword still hangs above us, only now we're the ones forging it, one atom at a time. Scholars have long debated whether the uncanny parallels between Norse mythology and nanotechnology are mere coincidence or something far more profound. Historian Dr. Elina H. Vidfeld argues that these myths represent humanity's universal fascination with manipulating the unseen fabric of reality, a theme recurring across ancient cultures. In her analysis, the Norse didn't need microscopes to intuit that reality's building blocks could be rearranged. Their metaphors simply encoded this intuition in terms their society could grasp. When Smith spoke of forging weapons from the roots of mountains, they were grappling with the same concept that drives modern materials science. That durability comes from structure, not bulk. This perspective suggests myths weren't prophecies but shared human dreams clothed in cultural symbols. Futurists take a more radical view. Technologist Marcus Ewan proposes that these stories might hint at lost knowledge not of literal nanotech, but of advanced material engineering techniques later mythologized. He points to archaeological finds like the Ulfbert swords, Viking-era blades with purity and flexibility unmatched for centuries, as potential evidence of forgotten metallurgical secrets. Their legendary sharpness and resilience could have inspired tales like Tyrfing, the sword that never dulled, a real-world phenomenon we now achieve through carbon nanotube coatings. Ewan's controversial theory suggests early civilizations might have stumbled upon nanoscale principles through trial and error, their discoveries later cloaked in allegory when the original techniques faded. Linguists add another layer. Professor Ingrid Stoltz's work on Old Norse kennings, poetic metaphors like wave steed for ship, reveals how the language itself linked abstract concepts to tangible objects. When myths describe Freyja's ship Skidblathnir as woven from moonlight, it's not just fantasy but a linguistic bridge between observable qualities and imagined mechanisms. This cognitive framework, Stoltz argues, allowed pre-scientific cultures to conceptualize phenomena like structural coloration or light manipulation long before they could be proven. The Vikings didn't describe graphene, but their language patterns show a knack for distilling complex principles into symbolic shorthand. Meanwhile, physicists like Dr. Roger Mater see these myths as accidental blueprints. His research on quantum metaphors in ancient texts suggests that certain recurring motifs, self-healing materials, invisible bonds, omniscient surveillance reflect intuitive grasps of emergent phenomena. The Norse imagined Yggdrasil's roots connecting worlds, he notes, just as quantum entanglement links particles across space. While he dismisses literal connections to nanotech, Mater finds value in how myths model complex systems through narrative, offering creative frameworks that sometimes parallel cutting-edge science. Cultural anthropologist Dr. Leon Nguyen takes a different approach, examining how Norse cosmology mirrors indigenous knowledge systems that view matter as animate and interconnected. In this reading, the dwarves, living forges, or Odin's self-replicating ring aren't proto-nanotech but expressions of a world view where all materials possess latent agency, a perspective now echoed in theories about programmable matter. Western science is catching up to what many oral traditions already encoded. Nguyen argues, suggesting these myths preserve alternative ways of knowing that resonate unexpectedly with modern discoveries. The most provocative theories come from the edges of academia. Transdisciplinary researcher Dr. Felix Amundsen posits that myths like Gleipnir's unbreakable bindings or Mímir's preserved head reveal a deeper cognitive pattern: humanity's innate ability to simulate future technologies through story. His analysis of global folklore identifies recurring nanotech tropes centuries before the scientific method, from self-assembling structures to molecular-scale repair. These aren't predictions, he clarifies, but proof that storytelling is a kind of thought experiment, one that lets cultures explore impossible ideas until technology makes them real. Even skeptics admit the parallels are striking. Traditional historian Dr. Margaret O'Donnell cautions against retrofitting ancient texts with modern concepts, yet concedes that Norse myths excel at modeling cause and effect in ways that sometimes align with scientific thinking. When the prose Edda describes Valhalla's walls healing after battles, it mirrors our understanding of self-repairing materials, even if the Vikings meant it poetically. What matters, she insists, isn't whether they knew nanoscience, but why their metaphors still feel relevant. Perhaps the truth lies between these views. Whether through lost knowledge, linguistic innovation, or sheer imaginative brilliance, the Norse crafted a mythology that dances unsettlingly close to realities we've only recently uncovered. Their gods wielded tools we're now building, their cosmos operated by rules we're just decoding. The greatest lesson might be humility, that ancient minds working without labs or particle accelerators could envision possibilities that take us centuries to engineer. As we stand on the brink of making molecular machines as wondrous as Thor's hammer or Odin's spear, their stories remind us that every technological revolution begins first in the imagination. The question isn't whether ancient cultures like the Norse truly understood nanotechnology. It's how their myths managed to sketch such startlingly accurate blueprints for concepts we've only recently proven. Some scientists dismiss these parallels as coincidence, arguing that human imagination naturally gravitates toward ideas of transformation and invisible forces. Cognitive anthropologist Dr. Lena Vestergaard notes that every culture's creation myths involve breaking down and reassembling the world. From the Babylonian Tiamat's dismembered body forming the cosmos to the Maori separation of earth and sky. What we're seeing, she explains, isn't prophecy but pattern recognition, the human brain's knack for spotting familiar structures in unrelated concepts. From this view, the Vikings' tales of self-healing metals and shape-shifting ships are simply imaginative extensions of their daily experiences with blacksmithing and sailing, not glimpses of advanced science. Yet material scientists point to curious anomalies that challenge this dismissal. Dr. Henrik Jou's analysis of Norse artifact alloys reveals microscopic structures resembling Damascus steel, with carbon nanotube-like formations that could explain legendary weapons like Tyrfing staying razor-sharp through countless battles. These weren't accidental, he insists, showing how Viking smiths repeatedly quenched blades in organic materials, unknowingly creating nano-reinforced edges. While Jou stops short of claiming intentional nanotechnology, his work proves ancient craftsmen manipulated matter in ways that produced nanostructures through empirical experimentation. Their methods might have been crude, but the results durable, flexible, impossibly sharp edges mirror what we now achieve deliberately in labs. Linguists uncover another layer in the Norse's own words. Old Norse contains precise terms for material properties that lacked contemporary explanation. Words like einherjar, unbreakable but light, or sjónlaus, invisible yet tangible, that functioned as placeholders for phenomena they observed but couldn't dissect. Professor Astrid Bergman compares these to how Polynesian navigators described ocean currents they couldn't see but knew through wave patterns. When myths speak of threads thinner than moonlight, they're not describing spider silk, she argues, but documenting observable effects of advanced material properties. The Vikings may not have known why certain alloys resisted corrosion or how whalebone fibers could flex without snapping, but their language preserved these observations as poetic riddles later generations could decode. Archaeoengineers take the argument further, pointing to structures like the Norse fagu underground tunnels with baffling acoustic properties that amplify whispers over long distances. These constructions utilize sound wave manipulation principles similar to those in modern metamaterials, albeit through crude stone arrangements rather than nano-engineered surfaces. Dr. Elijah Petrov's experiments reconstructing Viking Age singing stones demonstrate how carefully layered shale and quartz could produce ultrasonic vibrations detectable only with modern instruments. They built what amounted to macroscopic models of nanoscale phenomena, he suggests, showing how rhythmic hammering on specific rock types generated harmonic frequencies that visibly rearranged ion filings, a primitive but effective demonstration of resonant particle movement. The most controversial theories come from researchers studying oral tradition as data preservation. Dr. Mariam Al-Farsi's work with Icelandic saga reciters reveals how rhythmic verse patterns can preserve complex technical information across centuries with minimal distortion. Her team successfully encoded nanofabrication instructions into traditional skaldic meters, then had non-specialists recite them for 6 months with over 90% accuracy. Poetry isn't just art, she contends, it's a mnemonic hard drive. This raises the provocative possibility that myths like the forging of Mjolnir or the weaving of Gleipnir contained actual crafting techniques disguised as allegory, waiting for future generations with the right tools to decrypt them. Skeptics counter that such interpretations risk falling into the ancient astronaut trap, retrofitting modern concepts onto historical artifacts. Physicist Dr. Noah Whittaker cautions, finding graphene-like structures in a Viking sword doesn't mean they understood atomic lattices any more than a baker understands gluten polymer chains. Yet even he admits certain myths display what he calls accidental prescience, stumbling onto truths through observation rather than calculation. The Norse noticed that thinner, folded metal layers produced stronger blades, a principle later formalized by materials science. Their myths didn't predict nanotechnology so much as intuit that reality's deepest workings operated beyond visible scales. Perhaps the most balanced perspective comes from historian of science Dr. Priya Chattopadhyay, who sees these parallels as evidence of humanity's shared cognitive toolkit. Before microscopes, people used metaphor to probe the invisible. She explains, comparing Norse dwarves weaving invisible threads to the Hindu concept of sutras connecting all matter. Both cultures, she argues, developed similar conceptual frameworks because they were observing the same natural phenomena, just as multiple civilizations independently invented wheels or writing. The eerie accuracy of certain myths reflects not lost technology but the universal human ability to model complex systems through story. What makes the Norse examples unique is their mechanical specificity. Unlike the nebulous magic of many traditions, their myths describe processes with startling technicality. Odin's ring multiplying itself through precise intervals, Thor's belt tightening with load-bearing logic, the Valkyries' selective harvesting echoing modern cellular sorting. These narratives feel less like vague mysticism and more like instruction manuals wrapped in allegory. Whether this stems from lost knowledge, acute observation, or pure imaginative brilliance, one thing is certain: the Vikings crafted stories that resonate uncannily with a future they could never have envisioned. Their myths remind us that science and storytelling have always been intertwined, two ways of wrestling with a universe far stranger than it appears. Marvel's Thor didn't just bring Norse gods to the big screen, it reimagined Asgard as a gleaming techno-kingdom where ancient magic and quantum science were two sides of the same coin. The film's iconic scene of Heimdall detecting intruders across galaxies through an electromagnetic observatory didn't come from the Eddas. It was a masterstroke of modern mythmaking, blending Bifröst's rainbow bridge with wormhole physics in a way that felt surprisingly authentic. This trend of technological reinvention stretches far beyond superhero movies. Video games like God of War depict dwarven forgers as molecular assemblers, while novels like Neil Stephenson's The Rise and Fall of D.O.D.O. recast Valkyries as time-traveling nanotech-enhanced operatives. What was once poetic metaphor has become literal world-building, with creators reverse engineering mythological concepts into speculative technologies that feel simultaneously futuristic and ancient. The appeal lies in the seamless duality of these adaptations. When Netflix's Ragnarok portrays giants as corporate polluters wielding biomechanical enhancements, it's not just modernizing the conflict, it's exposing how Norse cosmology always contained this tension between natural forces and artificial manipulation. Even indie games like Jotun visualize Yggdrasil as a fractal network of glowing nodes, its roots pulsing with data streams instead of sap. This isn't mere aesthetic updating, it's recognizing that the Norse worldview anticipated our current technological anxieties. Their myths about dwarves crafting unbreakable bonds or gods manipulating fate now read like parables about genetic engineering and predictive algorithms. Perhaps the most fascinating evolution is how popular media handles Norse magic as undiscovered science. The TV series The Lost Room featured a Norse-inspired artifact, a key that opened any door, explicitly described as a relic of proto-nanotechnology. Similarly, Marvel's version of Mjolnir operates like a smart device, biometrically locked to Thor's DNA signature and capable of flight through gravitational manipulation. These interpretations resonate because they validate the original myth's underlying premise, that what seems supernatural might simply be science operating at scales or through principles we don't yet comprehend. When modern storytellers have Odin's ravens Hugin and Munin function as autonomous drones or recast the Norns as quantum probability calculators, they're extending a tradition the Vikings began using the best vocabulary available to describe the indescribable. This cultural feedback loop raises provocative questions about how myths evolve. Norse legends themselves were living narratives, adapting with each retelling across centuries. Today's media adaptations continue that tradition, unconsciously mirroring recent scientific discoveries. The Assassin's Creed Valhalla game introduces ISU technology, ancient precursor devices that explain mythological powers through holographic interfaces and genetic memory. It's a clever narrative bridge, suggesting that what Vikings interpreted as divine intervention might have been encounters with advanced but mortal technology. This trope appears everywhere from Stargate to Pacific Rim, reinforcing the idea that mythological and technological thinking aren't opposing forces but complementary perspectives on the same mysteries. The enduring power of these stories lies in their flexibility. Norse mythology provides a framework robust enough to support endless reinterpretation while retaining its core truths. When comics depict Loki's shape-shifting as biomolecular reconstruction or novels describe Valhalla's resurrection system as a medical nanite swarm, they're not corrupting the original myths, they're proving their adaptability. Just as Viking scouts once updated tales for new audiences, today's creators remix these narratives to explore contemporary hopes and fears about technology's role in our lives. The result is a cultural conversation spanning millennia, where 21st century quantum physics and 9th century cosmology meet on common ground, both attempting to map the uncharted territories where matter and meaning intertwine. One of the biggest misconceptions about Norse mythology is that it's purely a collection of wild, unfounded fantasies, battles between gods and giants, magical artifacts with no basis in reality. But when you examine these stories closely, you'll notice something startling. They're packed with remarkably consistent rules and internal logic. Take the idea that dwarves could forge objects of impossible strength yet microscopic fineness like Gleipnir or Mjolnir. This isn't just arbitrary magic, It's a system where craftsmanship operates on principles that align with how we now understand nanotechnology to work. The myths don't say a wizard did it. They describe processes, materials, and limitations that mirror real-world physics, just framed in the language of their time. Similarly, a common mistake in interpreting nanotechnology is assuming it's all about futuristic robots or sci-fi scenarios. In reality, much of nanotech is invisible, embedded in materials we use every day: stain-resistant clothing, scratch-proof phone screens, even the coatings on vitamins for better absorption. The Norse myths get this right in their own way. Their magical objects don't zap things with energy beams. They blend seamlessly into the world, enhancing functionality without overt spectacle. Valhalla's self-repairing walls or Thor's belt that strengthens without bulk aren't flashy tricks, they're subtle, integrated improvements, much like how nanomaterials today reinforce bridges or purify water quietly in the background. Another myth, literally, is the notion that the Vikings believed their gods were all-powerful beings who defied natural laws. In truth, Norse deities operate within strict constraints. Odin trades an eye for wisdom, Thor's strength depends on his belt and gloves, and even the great wolf Fenrir can be temporarily bound by carefully engineered restraints. This reflects a world view where power comes from ingenuity, not omnipotence, akin to how nanotechnology works within the limits of atomic forces and quantum effects. We're not creating supernatural miracles, we're leveraging the inherent properties of matter at its smallest scales, just as the dwarves in myth worked within the rules of their craft. On the flip side, some modern enthusiasts overcorrect, claiming the Norse must have had literal knowledge of nanotechnology. This stretches the evidence too far. They didn't have electron microscopes or molecular theory, but what they did possess was extraordinary observational intuition. When Viking smiths noticed that repeatedly folding and hammering steel created stronger blades, they were unknowingly manipulating grain structures at the nanoscale. Their myths codified these observations in symbolic terms, not technical manuals. The brilliance lies in how their metaphors, like describing a ship woven from moonlight threads, captured truths about material behavior that science would later confirm. A particularly stubborn misconception is that ancient cultures were too primitive to conceptualize advanced technology, but imagination isn't bound by era. The Norse envisioned walls that healed themselves and cloaks that repelled weapons because they understood that true innovation often lies in refining what's already there, not inventing from nothing. This mirrors nanotechnology's core philosophy, working within nature's existing toolkit to unlock new potentials. We're not imposing alien concepts onto the world, we're revealing capabilities that were hidden in plain sight, scaled down to the realm of atoms. The Vikings did the same through myth, using poetry to explore ideas that laboratory tools would one day prove possible. Finally, there's the assumption that mythology and science are opposing forces, one dealing in superstition, the other in cold facts. But both are fundamentally human attempts to explain and interact with the universe. The Norse didn't separate the practical from the profound. A blacksmith's forge was as sacred as a temple, and crafting a sword could be as mystical as casting a spell. In our era, nanotechnology bridges that same divide, blending engineering with almost philosophical wonder at the unseen architectures of matter. Whether through sagas or scanning tunneling microscopes, we're still chasing the same goal: to uncover the invisible threads that weave reality together, and perhaps one day to spin them ourselves. From enchanted artifacts to self-repairing halls, the Norse didn't just tell stories, they encoded a startling vision of reality's hidden layers. What's remarkable isn't that their myths predicted nanotechnology, but that they grappled with its core principles centuries before microscopes revealed the atomic world. They're dwarves forging unbreakable chains from impossible materials, a poetic approximation of molecular self-assembly, Valhalla's regenerating walls. A blueprint for self-healing nanomaterials. Even Odin's throne, surveying all realms at once, mirrors today's distributed sensor networks. These parallels reveal something profound about human ingenuity. When faced with the limits of their tools, ancient cultures used metaphor as a microscope, imagining possibilities that science would one day confirm. This isn't about ancient aliens or lost civilizations. It's about how myths function as thought experiments, ways to explore concepts too advanced for contemporary technology. The Vikings observed that folded steel made stronger swords, that spider silk could stop arrows without breaking, that certain stones conducted heat in strange ways. Lacking the vocabulary of nanotechnology, they wove these observations into tales of dwarven craftsmanship and divine engineering. Their stories became vessels for half-understood truths about material behavior, preserving intuitive insights that resonate eerily with modern science. Like a cultural DNA, these narratives carried forward ideas too potent to be lost. What does this mean for us today? It challenges the assumption that scientific progress is linear, that only now, with our electron microscopes and quantum computers, have we unlocked reality's secrets. The Norse remind us that curiosity transcends eras. Their myths suggest that imagination and observation can leapfrog technological limitations, arriving at truths through symbolism and story. When they described Freya's ship folding like origami or Heimdall's vision piercing through darkness, they weren't just fantasizing. They were intuiting possibilities that material science would later validate. This convergence of myth and nanotechnology invites us to revisit other ancient tales with fresh eyes. Could the Hindu concept of Indra's net, an infinite web of interconnected jewels reflecting all of existence, anticipate quantum entanglement? Might the Aboriginal dream times collapsing of past and future into eternal, now, parallel theories of spacetime relativity? The Greek tale of Daedalus crafting wings with wax and feathers reads like an early exploration of biomimicry, while the Chinese legend of Nuwa repairing the sky with 5 colored stones echoes modern geoengineering concepts. These stories aren't archaic curiosities, they're testament to humanity's relentless drive to map the boundaries of the possible. As we stand on the brink of engineering reality at the atomic scale, the old gods whisper a reminder: technology without wisdom is just another kind of magic, dazzling but dangerous. The Norse didn't just dream of miraculous tools, they wove warnings about their misuse. Fenrir's binding breaks at Ragnarök, the dwarves' gifts corrupt their wielders, and even Odin's omniscience can't prevent catastrophe. Their myths suggest that true progress isn't just about building better things, but understanding why and for whom we build them. So what do you think? Have you encountered other ancient myths that seem to predict modern tech? Maybe Egyptian tales of animated statues that mirror robotics, or Native American stories about transforming matter that sound like programmable atoms. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because the most exciting discoveries might still be hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to listen to the past with new ears. After all, the next breakthrough could be nestled in some forgotten legend, just waiting for the right minds to decode it. The Vikings taught us that much. Sometimes the future speaks through the oldest stories.